Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. In today's episode, don't calculate a table's bills the moment you get their order ticket, it makes it hard to keep track. You got it, boss. The time my office became a daycare. No overtime without management approval? Great. I can't have weekends off as promised? No problem. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Don't calculate a table's bills the moment you get their order ticket, it makes it hard to keep track. You got it, boss. Hello friends, this is my first post on the Malicious Compliance subreddit. While it may not be as juicy and dramatic as a number of the ones I've seen, I just wanted to share something that happened to me today while I was at work. Info: this does not take place in the US, Europe, or Australia. This is set in Asia. I won't clarify where since it's not important, just wanted to give you guys context. For starters, I'm 23, a university student working part-time at my aunt's restaurant to make a little extra mullah, meant moolah, before the academic year starts. My job is pretty simple, it's an all-rounder job where I need to take people's orders, send tickets to the kitchen, calculate each table's bills, handle payments, and clear tables. I'm only here until the end of this week because I secured another gig elsewhere before the academic year starts, so I figured why not finish this week for a little extra cash before then. I get along with most of the staff, all of whom are a decade or so older than me, and said individuals work at the restaurant full-time. There's another part-timer, 19, who's working here and he comes to work whenever he's able since he's studying too. He wasn't around for a couple of weeks, so I've been left to sort out most waitressing matters. My shifts during lunch hour get particularly busy, which is why my system keeping the workflow super smooth is a crucial point to this post. The moment after bills have been settled, tables need to be cleared immediately because new customers come pouring in and some insist on being seated even before the tables have been cleared or wiped down. I came up with a system in the 3 weeks that I've been working here that works for both myself and my colleagues. Upon receiving tickets for orders that have been received, I always key in their order according to the table they're sat so that it's less time consuming in the event other customers want to settle their respective bills. Customers are expected to come to the payment counter when they're ready to pay, so this system is a lot easier and much more efficient than letting tickets pile up and only calculate the bill right when customers are about to pay, which results in a longer line. I always make it a point to ask customers if their food has all arrived, if they were satisfied with the quality of their order, and if they ordered anything else that I hadn't seen on their tickets. Once they verify their orders are correct, that's all. I go about my day and mind my business. That was until the other part-timer approached me earlier today. His point was an eyebrow raiser, for sure. I'm not the type of person to pick fights or argue, so since he was so insistent that my way of doing things was making it difficult for him to keep track of additional orders at each table, I decided to just let him have at it since he was so happy to tell me how to do my job. I simply smiled and nodded at him, making a beeline to the cleaning supplies and thinking to myself, you want me to stop punching in people's orders? Sure thing. For a solid hour or two, I only collected the tickets, bringing them to the cash register and letting them pile up, just as he requested. When I noticed customers stand up from their seats and making their way to the payment counter, I would speedwalk to the cleaning supplies and start collecting plates to show that my hands were occupied and that I wouldn't be able to sort out people's bills. I left it all to my dear coworker who tried telling me what to do and how to do it. It was the right call to make because the line that followed, due to his insistence on changing the system, snaked about halfway through the restaurant, full of customers waiting their turn to pay their bill. Once lunch hour had died down, I smiled to myself and went back to keying in people's tickets the way I always had. My part-time coworker sheepishly approached me with new additions to existing orders since then. The time my office became a daycare. my workplace, we have an internal employee site where we can make announcements, post project updates, etc. For each post/comment, you can see the employee's name and a small profile photo. Most profile photos were normal, but it wasn't uncommon for someone's photo to include family, pets, or the person in an action situation, like skiing or running a marathon. Nothing insane. Post-COVID, people sometimes started adding other kinds of flair/icons to their photos. Could be a sports team logo, a pride flag, or whatever else. Around election 2020, the situation began escalating. Some people changed their photos to elicit more charged emotions, like Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, religious symbols, or just straight endorsements for some politician that was clearly meant to rile up another group. Since we were just in a state of total F***ck at this point, a few brave individuals even changed their photos to anime, and one guy who shared a name with a famous person set his photo to a picture of the musician because he thought it was funny. HR stepped in and, rather than just say no political imagery, they probably didn't want to bother defining political, and honestly at this point I didn't blame them. They made the rule: profile photos must be a clear headshot of the employee on a plain background. No other person, animal, flag, or other icon should be visible. You are permitted to wear a hat as long as it is a solid color and abides by other stated guidelines. They claimed this was due to people displaying images that did not depict themselves or included a group of people, which made it difficult for people to connect names to faces, but we all knew this was because of the political shitshow happening internally. Next week, cue malicious compliance. The rules did not state that the photo had to be recent. Dozens of employees set their profile photo to be their baby photos. HR must have gotten a kick out of it, and were probably just relieved the internal political war was over, because a couple of them even joined in. Anyway, that's the story of how I worked at a company full of children. No overtime without management approval? Great! This one dates back a while to 2017, but I've been wanting to share it ever since, so apologies if it's a bit long. Background: I was in my third year of an accounting job I absolutely hated, but I also hated the industry as a whole and was essentially using the position to bide my time as I learned a new skill to eventually jump to an entirely new career. My boss at the time, who I'll call Tia, was the shining example of the specific flavor of toxicity that I'd found sinking its teeth into most of the accounting departments I've worked in. Imagine the power trip of middle management plus the prestige of managing multi-million-dollar transactions. She was the first accountant for the company when it started and had become the de facto choice for new highest position in the department every time the company's growth called for a departmental restructuring. The only thing I could determine was earning her these positions was her confidence and conviction in the way she determined things needed to be done, which C-suite just ate right up, even paying for her to get whatever training/certification she needed to qualify for the new roles presented to her. In the meantime, she'd given me 3 consecutive annual reviews scoring a solid 0% satisfaction rate each time, which was always enough to justify a 0% raise but never enough to justify actually letting me go and putting me out of my misery, so at this point I was fully checked out, especially after finding out I'd become the lowest paid employee out of 100, including interns and the front desk clerk. In the latest restructuring, Tia was not promoted to the new CFO role as the board wanted real experience, but was given a controller role while a new level of management was added between us. HR had also become its own department, no longer falling under accounting's purview. Tia didn't seem to like simultaneously becoming second in accounting's command while also losing control of HR. She convinced the company to send her to law school so she could eventually transition into some kind of Frankenstein-esque accounting/legal/HR position that would oversee essentially everything the company did outside of actual production. This required her to leave the office around 2 to 3 p.m. every afternoon to attend classes, making her unreachable until the evenings. The new management position that opened between us saw 3 to 4 employees join and leave for greener pastures over the course of a year and a half, but the story takes place while I was under the only manager I actually liked, who I'll call Kevin. I could see him doing what he could to advocate for me while still being forced by Tia to treat me the way she had previously treated me, and I could tell it made him feel awkward handing these decisions down my way. I respected his attempts to work with us, and he actually helped us create a functional/efficient department for a few glorious but short-lived months. Story. Suddenly, a bill was passed in the US stating that salaried employees making less than $40K/year would be eligible for overtime pay, taking effect later in the year. After 3 years of no raises, I was sitting at around $37,500 per year, making me eligible for the eventual overtime. Working in accounting, it's pretty much expected that you'll be working 50 to 60 hours a week, especially when closing out the monthly/quarterly/annual financials. However, after being shafted for so long and still being stuck with *T work that had little effect on the actual financials, I was actively giving them as close to 40 hours a week as possible, only staying behind if we'd gotten an important request towards the end of the day that Kevin begged me to take care of before leaving. I knew it would look a bit off if I suddenly started working a bunch of overtime after this change took place, so I planned on very slowly ramping up my hours over the preceding months to eventually take advantage of the extra pay. After 1 to 2 months, I was regularly putting in 45 to 55 hours a week, with most extra hours spent remoting into my home computer to practice programming, and looking forward to the income this new workflow would provide me. I guess they eventually caught on, as Kevin pulled me into a conference room and presented me with a contract to sign stating that I wasn't to work any overtime without Tia's approval. For reasons you'll see below, I quickly recognized this as a way to never have to work an extra hour for the rest of my tenure at the company. I signed it and immediately cut out all overtime, leaving at 4 p.m. that day as I'd worked through lunch. The next day, I stopped showing up early, started taking actual lunches, and could be heard peeling out of the lot at 5:01 every day. Kevin noticed my sudden lack of hours and tried to mention the contract not being in effect until the bill kicked in. I reminded him that we had a signed contract that failed to list a start or end date, so I considered it fully in effect. I could see the oh shit realization hit, but he begrudgingly accepted the loss. I'll mention again that he was great, and this action had obviously come from Tia, and he was now stuck dealing with the repercussions the same as I was, so he really didn't fight me too hard on it. Later that week, an important client request came in around 4:45. He asked if I could stay behind to work on it, and I asked if he had Tia's approval. This was his second oh shit moment, as unfortunately, due to her classes, Tia had become unreachable between 2 to 8 p.m. every weekday for the foreseeable future, and he didn't usually know he'd need extra work from me until after 4. Everything went exactly to plan as I got to enjoy a comfortable 40-hour week, throwing the contract back at them any time they tried to squeeze even an extra minute out of my time. Now, for the real kicker. Before the new bill took effect, a judge blocked it and shut it down entirely, meaning no more overtime pay for salaried employees. A crippling loss for the workforce, but I at least still got to enjoy my new schedule. Management tried to claw back my hours, but hey, I still have a contract that says I can't, sorry guys. I was finally pulled into Tia's office, who tried to explain the lack of necessity for the overtime approval now that the overtime bill wouldn't be coming into play. I again reminded her we had a signed contract with no dates and no mention of this being in relation to impending overtime law. Then came my favorite part of the conversation. So, yes, this is still a valid contract, but I want to be clear that it doesn't override your original employment contract here with us. You mean the employment contract that states 40 hours a week? And that was that. I was eventually let go a few months later after replying because I don't. When the CFO mentioned people saying I look like I don't care about my job, but I'd finally built up my skills enough to find a position in my new industry while still enjoying my severance, so I consider it a win. For years later, I'm doing work I enjoy from home, hanging out with my dogs with a calmer mind and a fatter wallet, all while they're still stressing over someone else's money. I can't have weekends off as promised? No problem. I'm a delivery driver that listens to a lot of Reddit content to muster on throughout the long days. Shout out to KCC and Storytime, and some fast food stories reminded me of this malicious compliance from my high school years. So I was but a wee naive lad in my junior year of high school when I got my first job at good old Don's, which happened to be the busiest one in my state. I was excited to start working and actually earn money to pay for gas and leisure for myself on the weekends. I had recently moved to another city close to where I grew up and where all my friends lived, still very close friends to this day, and I grew up privileged with a $100 monthly allowance for gas to drive to school and such. It wasn't enough to actually have fun on weekends considering gas prices due to the distance I had to drive to see my friends. That was when I decided a part-time job would solve my problems until I graduated and went to college. So, I applied to McDonald's since they offered decent pay and flexible scheduling. Remember that part for later. My schedule when I started was 3 weeknights after school and Saturday or Sunday mornings. I worked this schedule for about a month and a half before I got sick of missing out on parties the night before I had to work the next day. It was draining me socially. I was working about 20-ish hours a week on top of school, so I was getting home late to do HW most nights and couldn't properly enjoy my weekends like I wanted to. I talked with my general manager and told them I wouldn't be able to work weekends anymore, but I'm more than willing to work an extra weeknight to make up for it, and they agreed. This went fine for another 2 months, and I got good at the job and became one of their more reliable workers since I was able to cover any position they needed me to. Then they decided to have a talk with me, informing me that I would have to start working weekends because they didn't have enough people in the morning rushes to be able to meet the McD's quota for service. I told them that I was told I wouldn't have to work weekends since I traded Saturday or Sunday for an extra weeknight shift, but they told me I would work only a few hours on some weeknights and would still be working the same amount of hours per week. I had no choice in the matter. I was pissed to say the least until I remembered their policy for getting days off. As long as you asked for days off in their calendar booked 2 weeks in advance, it was a guaranteed day off. You guys can see where this is going. I maliciously complied and asked for every weekend off for the next 4 months in the calendar book. Sure, my paycheck took a hit, but I didn't care. Time with the boys was more rewarding than an extra $45 a paycheck. It wasn't until 2.5 months later that I got pulled into the office, and my manager asked me why I asked for all the weekends off for those months. I told them that I got the job because I was under the assumption that the scheduling was flexible, but I was told I had to work weekends. The manager looked absolutely defeated and tried to compromise for every other weekend. This was when I got another malicious thought in my head and said, okay, I guess if I had TO. Cue Malicious Compliance Part 2. This time, instead of asking for every weekend off, I asked for every other weekend off. Another month went by before they started scheduling me for weekdays only but with slightly longer weeknight shifts like I wanted. I only got away with this because turnover rates were high, and I was able to work any position like I said, so I knew there was no way they were gonna fire me. I have many more stories from that place, and I just thought of another while typing this that I might post in r/pro revenge. Thanks for reading, and please be kind to service workers. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.